Is this a time where you're just saying, I want to feel good living in my body. I want to feel good about my body. I want to have no more brain fog and clarity of thought. And I want to have some emotional and spiritual breakthroughs. Well, I have some truly fascinating information for you, and one that is really, really helpful. I can't even tell you how helpful it has been in my life. And I think it's really going to resonate with you. And it's stuff that you can start doing right away. And so I touched on it in a previous video, and I think it was called the Spine, the Spirit, and the Yoga Wheel. So those of you who saw that, welcome back. And those of you who have not, I would really encourage you to watch it, because it's kind of the precursor to what we're going to go over today. But we're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of the spine, the spirit, and you. So the central nervous system then is at the hub of all of this that we're going to talk about today. And I've been on this super deep dive on the central nervous system. I've been obsessed, and I have just spent countless hours researching it. And so I feel like, how I would just break it down to its simplest form is that the brain is like an elaborate antenna or receiver, but it also is somewhat of a filter, because we couldn't receive all of the information around us at any given time. It would be so noisy. It would feel like so many things were coming at us at once. It would literally drive us crazy. So it is a filter. And what I mean by that is, like, let's just say you're thinking about buying a Jeep Grand Cherokee. So, you're contemplating that, and then you're driving down the road, and everywhere you go, you're seeing Jeep Grand Cherokees. So the brain filters out things that we are tuned into, or things that we're interested in, or things that we believe in. And then it sends those messages down the spinal cord, and then the spinal cord takes it out to the peripheral nerves. And so the spinal cord, then, we could say that it is like a super highway, or it is the thing that receives the current of information, or if you will, it's like a river. And the reason I say that is because in the spinal cord, the cerebral spinal fluid is the thing that is the medium that carries those messages back and forth to the brain. And I want to tell you about a quote I came across from Dr. Roger Sperry. He won the Nobel Prize in 1981 for his research in the split brain. And he said that 90% of the stimulation and the nutrition sent to the brain, or generated for the brain, is done so through spinal movement. Think about that. So 90% of the stimulation and nutrition that we receive is done so through movement. So if we have a lack of movement, then we have a lack of good nutrients and stimulation to the brain. That's pretty phenomenal. And so the spine, it is one of the things that, when we are in the embryonic stage, it develops very, very early, and then the body forms around the spine. And it starts at the brainstem and the medulla oblongata, and it goes all the way down to the sacrum. And that medium, that cerebral spinal fluid, is the watery substance that, takes those messages back and forth to the brain. And it also fills the ventricles in the brain, which is basically the cavities and the hollow spaces in the brain. And so it is the fluid that is flowing in the river of our brain and our spinal cord. And one of the guys I was studying, he made me laugh. He said, it is the thing that brings the nutrients, but it is also the thing that takes the waste away. And he likened it to, if you're, sitting down in front of your devices, your brain, your neurons in your brain, like, produce waste, and it's like poo in your brain. And so not only does that cerebral spinal fluid bring the groceries, but it is also the thing that takes the poo away, if you can imagine. And so if we have a healthy spine, then we have one that is, flexible, and we can move easy, and it provides support and structure to the body. If we have an unhealthy spine, it can manifest in ways like a depressed immune system. It can give us neck, lower back, hip, knee and even foot pain. It can cause chronic headaches or excessive brain fog. And if you think about it, if we're not getting rid of the poo in our brain, no wonder we get brain fog and no wonder we get chronic headaches if our cerebral spinal fluid is not flowing through our superhighway. It can cause excess fatigue. It can cause mobility abnormalities or walking abnormalities. So we can think then of the central nervous system as the roots to, how we experience our life, because our brain is receiving the information, then the spinal cord is taking that information and it's orchestrating the activity and the perceptions of the body. Or you could consider it the route in which we experience our life. And that's why Sadguru was talking about, the spine is the axis of our universe, and we are that universe. And he says, if you don't believe me, just cut a few wires in your universe and see how well your axis works. Not very well. So we could also say then that the spine is like the windmill that generates the electrical current throughout the body. And so if we have a very low current, then we're going to have very low brain stimulation and brain nutrition. If we have a low current, then we're going to have very low ability to move. If we have a low current, then we're going to have very low ability to perceive the world, our outside world, in a correct manner. So it really is super important. 90% of the stimulation and nutrition that is generated to the brain is done so through spinal movement. So that cerebral spinal fluid then really needs to turn over on an often or a regular basis. So we're going to talk about, how we're going to get into how we do that. So here's where it gets really interesting. Besides the fact we all have had at some point in our life a situation where our back or our neck or our hip or our knees hurt, and it really jacks with your life. But what's so fascinating, and which I couldn't believe when I found this out. So I've been doing hours and hours and hours of research on the spinal cord. I just felt like, there was a deeper message that was trying to be explained to me in this mystical experience that I had. And so I was looking up, how do you stimulate the medulla oblongata? That seems to be an important part. So hold on to your socks. This blew me away when I found out about this. The medulla oblongata in some ancient teachings is referred to as the mouth of God. And I was like, are you kidding me? The beginning of my spinal cord below my super antenna is called the mouth of God. And so then I'm like, obviously, immediately, I'm searching out what the word sacrum means. And the word sacrum in Latin means the sacred. So our spine starts at the mouth of God and runs all the way down to the sacred. So it's back and forth. These messages are going from the mouth of God to the sacred. I was just like, oh my God. And then it became very apparent to me that what I read, that the soul or the spirit swims in the cerebral spinal fluid, but our lives are constructed to really distract us or mislead us or lead us away from this, mouth of God to the sacred. Because, we all know that if we're just living a biological or a physical life, that's really, really out of balance. Just go to the gym and watch a meathead who, is just so obsessed with working out that, they would kiss themselves in the mirror if they could. That's what some traditions call the food body, because they say, you eat a heap of food and it gives you this heap of flesh. But for me, I was also very, very distracted and led astray. And it was literally my coping mechanism, my food body or my physical body. It led me away from understanding some things of my inner landscapes. So it went something like this. I was really in a horrible personal situation. It was very, very bad. It was very detrimental to my health. So I started marathon running. And I would go out and I would it was my way of escape. I would go out and run and run and run and run and run. And I would come home and I would be so tired that no matter who said what to whom, it wouldn't affect me. And then because of that, even though I was tired, I still had some anxiety. I would overeat, because you can eat as much as you want when you're marathon running. So I was totally preoccupied and led away from my inner landscape. And there's nothing wrong with going out and having a pizza or having a nice dinner, having a few drinks, coming home, sitting down on the couch and zoning out. But if that is all you have, and that is what you're using as your coping mechanism, that is out of balance, and it's leading us astray, and it's distracting us from this super highway of information starting at the brain, this antenna from the mouth of God all the way down to the sacrum and back up. And we all know that we can also be distracted on an emotional level. There are those people that are just trigger happy. You say anything and they feel like it's a personal affront to, who they are and their personhood, or they're upset if they don't get a comment or a like on Facebook, or, they're super into gossip. They're always looking on, did you see what's her name? She and her family went there on vacation, and I can't believe they wore this, and I can't believe they did that. That is being distracted on an emotional level. We can also be distracted on a mental level where, you're doing so much gaming, or you're watching trash TV, or you're overreading novels. Those things in and of themselves aren't bad, but when they lead you away from receiving the subtle messages and the subtle information, that the antenna or the receiver or the brain can pick up on, and then takes it from the mouth of God down to the sacrum and back up, that is a really limited life. And I have this friend that I talk to on a regular occasion that is also doing the same work that I am. And I got this word picture for my friend, and it was as if her inner landscape was this plot of land. And so we could think of our inner life as, this plot of land that we build a fort around, or we build a wall around, or in some cases, it could be a self-prescribed prison. And, we were justified in building that wall around ourselves because we had trauma, or we had things that hurt us, or we don't want to be embarrassed, or we're uncomfortable about this scenario. And so we build this wall as a safety mechanism around our inner landscape. And let's just say it's a 10-acre plot. And, you're living your life, you're just doing you, and all of a sudden you begin to realize that inner plot of land is confining. And so that confinement might manifest as boredom, or that confinement might manifest as like maybe an ailment, like happened to me. I began to short circuit because of the way that I had structured my life. I wanted everything to stay away from me, and I was just driven into my biology that I began to short circuit. And so my soul began to urge me like, hey, you need to break out of fight, flight, or freeze. You need to begin to maybe, expand your plot of land on your inner landscape. But what happens when we do that, when we receive these gentle nudgings from our spirit or our soul, our ego will slap us down and be like, hey, who do you think you are? That's not ever going to happen. You can't dream big like that. You're X amount of years old, or no one in your family's ever been successful, or you're too much like your mom, or whatever it is that our ego tells us to keep us confined in our 10-acre plot. Or if we start, trying to expand or enlarge the place of our habitation, then our family and friends become, like that voice in our head. And they're like, hey, little Miss Fancy Britches, you need to cool your jets. That's making me uncomfortable. What about me? Like, what's going to happen to us? Or why are you doing that? Or I don't get it. Or whatever it is that we feel like they are saying to us, whether they're saying it or not, there is that walled fort on the inside of us that yanks us down. So what do? We start climbing a tree and we start, like looking over the fence, like, I wonder what the neighbors are doing. Or we start looking at things on Facebook or watching videos on YouTube. And we want to know, like, what is on the other side of the fence, because this is becoming pinching and confining. And so, when we begin to have those realizations that our inner landscape is too confining, I think the tragedy happens when we think it's on a beach in Jamaica. Now, a beach in Jamaica might help us momentarily, but it's not on a beach in Jamaica. It's about our internal landscape and that wall or that fort or that self-prescribed prison that we have created on the inside to keep us safe. It's not some airy-fairy looking up in the clouds and escaping through the mystical either. It's not there. The tragedy is when we don't realize what Jesus said, that the kingdom of heaven is in us. It's not in Jamaica. It's not in Colorado. It's not in the clouds. It is on the inside. It's our inner landscape. It's that inner highway. It's that mouth of God to the sacrum. It is receiving the subtle messages that the brain can tune into without the confinement of our plot of land on the inside. Instead of being distracted and looking over the fence at what the neighbors are doing and living that kind of a tragedy, we need to build a ladder. And that ladder is your internal ladder. Yoga is classified, or they call it, the ladder to God. And yoga's not the only one that talks about that being a ladder. In Genesis, Jacob talked about how he saw angels going up and down the ladder. And if you study that out, it means a cord. And so mastering our spine and breaking out of the confinement of the programs or the safety mechanism or the things that we're willing to receive that go from the mouth of God down to the sacred and back up again is really building your internal spine. Because when you do that and you don't stay 100% distracted by your food body or your emotions or your mind or trying to escape, into the clouds, if you really begin to do that and master your spine, then what happens is you have more energy, you have more stimulation, you have more mobility, because when we are contracted, when we have bad posture, when we have, things in us internally that cause us to be contracted, we are not a superhighway of information, and we certainly can't receive any subtle messages. It would have to be a bolt of lightning or skywriting. And so the video that I did on the spine, the spirit, and the yoga wheel was my initial attempt at showing you how you can begin to use that yoga wheel to stimulate that cerebral spinal fluid, that medium that brings that information up and down the spine. And so that is a great way to do it. And then, of course, you should be doing breath work with all of it and any of it at all times. And if you don't want to do a breathwork practice, then I would highly recommend that you at least get a pulse oximeter. They're less than $20, and I'll put a link below. And then that way you can begin to see, how much oxygen you have in your blood, and then how many, times it's beating per minute. And, there are plenty of people who have panic attacks when nothing bad in their life is happening. It's because they have these hardened patterns of breath that are like panting, which is what happened to me. I was having a breathing pattern like I was panting. And it, even though my life was happy at the time, I totally short-circuited and something had to change. So breath work, or your breath, is the thing that ties our spirit to our body. If you don't believe me, just cut off your breathing and your body will fall away instantaneously or automatically. So, you can use the yoga wheel and then you can do breath work in addition to that. And I did a video about how to start a breath work practice, which I will also link. But, stretching your spinal cord every day. And really the best way is the yogi squat. And I have a video that is right after this one that I'm going to do a little yoga routine and teach you how to do the yogi squat. But every day, and it's not something that you have to do for 30 minutes a day. When I first started out, hopefully I'll do a video sometime on I do portals or E do portals and this whole thing that happened with the yogi squat and me. But you don't have to do it for 30 minutes a day. You just have to do it a couple times a day for a few minutes or once a day for several minutes. And what happens is when you align your spine in the correct alignment, then you'll begin to get this energy of flow from your brain down to the sacred, from the mouth of God down to the sacred and back up. And you will notice that it will automatically increase your energy. And so, the yoga wheel is a really great thing to do. Breath work is a really great thing to do. The yogi squat, I'm going to give you a little yoga flow routine that is an adjunct to what we've been doing or what we've been talking about in this video. But in summarization, if you have limited mobility in your body, then you're going to have limited vitality, stimulation, and nutrition to your brain. If you have limited, expansion and mobility and energy flowing through your superhighway, then you're going to have poo in your brain. You're not going to get that turnover of your cerebral spinal fluid. If you have contraction in your inner landscape and, every time someone doesn't text you, you think they're mad at you. That is meaning that you have, a contraction in your emotions and you need to get better energy flowing through your spinal cord and your superhighway. If you are so distracted that you can't pick up on the subtle messages that the divine or God or source or Jesus or whoever it is that you feel like wants to communicate with you, it is such a limiting, confining, fearful life. And so, the way that we expand the place of our habitation is building our inner ladder, and the spine is the ladder to God. And so I really hope this is been resonating with you. It has just been so profoundly effective in my life. And I truly believe that we don't have to do big sweeping changes. It's the little foxes that spoil the vine. And it's the little things that we do on a consistent basis that really tend to the vine or tend to the spine or tend to the superhighway. So if you're going to try this, would you please put yes in the comments below, and would you like and subscribe and maybe comment below, because it really does help the circulation of my videos, and my passion is to get this information out so we can all have a life that we love and create a life to love. So until next time, I'm believing you're going to get flexibility in your spine and you're going to be blessed.